Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our weekly tropical weather outlook for today, Saturday, May 31st, 2025. This is it. This is the final outlook video for our weekly videos that we do every Saturday of the off season. This is the final one because tomorrow is June 1st, and tomorrow begins the hurricane season officially in the Atlantic Basin. Obviously, the Eastern Pacific has already begun, and they've already had their first named storm, Alvin, this past week, and it looks like they might get more activity, but we'll go over that momentarily. But throughout the video, we'll also be going over what you need to know, factors to look at for this hurricane season, and we'll also review all the hurricane forecasts for this year that have been released so far. So settle in. It's going to be a long video. We're going to go over everything you need to know and also take a look at activity that might happen at least over the next week and a little announcement and note for tomorrow because we have some activities coming up tomorrow. So lots to go over today. Let's get started as we typically do with these weekly Saturday outlooks, starting off with the NOAA Coral Reef Watch Sea Surface Temperature Anomaly Map updated as of yesterday. This map always updates a day behind, but it doesn't really matter because I don't think really there should be that much of a difference. But what does it look like on pretty much the final map here before the start of the hurricane season? And this is one of the first key factors into what you should expect for this hurricane season, or at least what you could get an idea of this hurricane season, is how warm in general the Atlantic is, especially how warm the Caribbean and Gulf and Western Atlantic is. And this is especially important for early on in the season because I've been saying this for a while. The climatologically favored areas, especially in the month of June and even in July, generally is in the Western Atlantic, in the Western Caribbean Gulf, and off the Southeast coast. We typically don't look out here towards the Eastern Atlantic for development until August, anyways. So this area is the only area that really matters. And the fact that it is much above normal definitely is a very not very promising sign if you are looking at if you want the season to be below normal, because it definitely means at least one aspect of tropical development, which is warm sea surface temperature anomalies. That is one thing you can check off the box in terms of whether or not conditions are favorable in the Atlantic. And even out here in the Eastern Atlantic, things have warmed up quite a bit. It's especially warm here in the subtropics near the Iberian Peninsula and kind of entraining into the Canary Current. And then we kind of have this horseshoe. I should have shown a global map so you could see the entire Atlantic up to Greenland, but there's kind of this horseshoe from Greenland all the way down into the subtropics and then off into the southeast coast, where we get this warm anomalies. And that is somewhat of a favorable look. You would ideally want that to be further south and kind of coming in directly into the MDR with slightly cooler sea surface temperature anomalies here in the subtropics, but still not a bad look overall, especially when you compare it to the Pacific. It definitely looks much cooler in the Pacific, and the biggest part of that is we don't have an El Nino this year. We may not get a La Nina, although there's still a chance that we could. It's a little bit up in the air, but one thing that it looks almost for sure at this point now is that we absolutely will not have a La Nina in the Pacific this year. And also look at how cold the anomalies off the Baja Peninsula and southwest coast of the United States are. This also has an impact on hurricane season. You would presume cooler anomalies spreading into the Eastern Pacific would probably keep a tap on things or keep a cap here on things in the Eastern Pacific. And in turn, you would think if we have less activity here in the Pacific, we could potentially have more activity here in the Atlantic. And really quickly going over the Pacific sea surface temperature anomalies in a graph form, not a map, like a spatial map form. The Nino 3.4 still in the negatives. We're obviously not down in La Nina territory. The latest value is negative zero point 0.1 Celsius. And over the last several days, we've kind of had a slight uptick a little bit in terms of these sea surface temperature anomalies, but this graph in specific, this will kind of wax and wane and fluctuate throughout time. But if you look at the overall trend, we are definitely not seeing, especially like this, we had in early March where we had a huge warming in the Pacific, and there was a lot of questions about whether or not we would get an El Nino this year. But since then, we've then rapidly dropped off, and we've been pretty consistent right around neutral, sometimes going into warm neutral, but for the most part, staying in ENSO neutral, especially on the cooler side of ENSO neutral. Definitely not the kind of look you would expect if you think that an El Nino is going to happen this year. And now that we're pretty much on the cusp of hurricane season, I mean, it starts tomorrow. There's just no El Nino happening this hurricane season. You could take that pretty much to the bank at this point. And then you compare that to the MDR sea surface temperature anomalies, warmer than normal. Also dropped off a little bit since the beginning of the year, but we're still warmer than normal in the MDR as a whole, and this includes the Eastern Atlantic and the Caribbean. And I say that because I have the map too for specifically the Eastern Atlantic, which is the MDR east of the island. So pretty much this section through here. And it's slightly cooler than normal for right now. Obviously, it was much warmer early on in the year, especially much warmer last year. I mean, everything was much warmer last year. But as again, I mention this with caution because it's late May, and we know how the trend has been over the last several years that the Atlantic, even if it's not warm by the time we get to May and June, the Atlantic has the warming period by the time we get to July and August, where the African monsoon turns on and it helps warm up the Eastern Atlantic very significantly right as we get into the peak of the hurricane season. And typically, once we get to August, that's when we only really begin to look at activity in the Eastern Atlantic. So I wouldn't be too concerned about this as of right now, especially when you're considering the fact that the Nino 3.4 is cooler than normal. We're not expecting an El Nino, and that is pretty much the biggest factor, in my opinion, for this hurricane season is the fact that we do not have an El Nino. No El Nino automatically puts us in a better shape for, well, puts us in a better shape for if you are expecting this hurricane season to be an active one, which it most likely will be, given all these things combined. And also the SOI too. This is something that I've been pretty much following assiduously since December. If you've been watching my weekly videos since December, since the end of last year's hurricane season, I would always bring up the SOI every single weekend. And if you know, if the SOI is in positive territory, that generally means atmospherically we're more in tune with the La Nina. Trades are stronger in the Pacific, and you get the whole picture. While obviously the opposite is can be said for if we're in a negative SOI. And we've kind of been in a negative SOI, at least on the 30-day average recently, but has gone back up in the last several days. Now the latest 30-day average is at +3. The 90-day average has always held consistent, even with the 30-day average going negative. The 90-day is held consistent, and the latest 90-day average is at +5. Bottom line, yet again, another factor in saying that there will be no El Nino. And also, the SOI being positive, if you want the specifics, the most favorable SOI values for us being actually fully in tune with the La Nina. Like if you want to look at the SOI to determine whether or not we have a La Nina, the threshold is +7 and higher. So we're not quite at +7. So that also plays into the fact that we kind of have a cooler ENSO neutral right now. So it kind of connects. Kind of interesting how that blends in with each other. And finally, here the CFS, sea surface temperature anomalies. And this pretty much confirms, as I've been saying, this is the sea surface temperature forecast from the CFS all the way out till next year. And notice how we pretty much stay almost flat at neutral. We don't even go up or we don't even go down, although We'll have to see. Maybe this could still go down, and maybe we could see a weak La Nina still. I've seen some people mention that, but I'm not entirely sure. But dead at neutral, no El Nino, and that is once again the biggest factor for this hurricane season. Combine that with a generally warmer Atlantic, you would definitely imagine it's going to be an active season. But I guess if you look at the CFS precipitation forecast, you might say, maybe, maybe not. This is the latest CFS forecast for August, September, October in precipitation anomalies in the Atlantic. And this kind of represents a little bit the uncertainty that we can have in ENSO neutral years because it could really go either way. Some of our most active hurricane seasons have been in ENSO neutral years, but also some of our most inactive seasons have also been in ENSO neutral years too. 2013 was in a cool neutral year, and that was a very, very below normal dead season. I mean that's the year that everybody always brings up whenever the Atlantic is shut down for business for the foreseeable future. Everybody starts going, "Oh, we're going to have a 2013." And on the flip side, years like 2005, 2017 were also generally, at least in the peak of the hurricane season, were cool neutrals. Both of those years did end up becoming weak La Ninas once we got towards the winter, but at least during the peak of the hurricane season, which by the way, I should point that out too, the peak time frame, meaning August, September, October, I would assume is generally right in here and pretty much on the CFS, once again, dead neutral. And in some of our most active hurricane seasons, as I've been saying, 2005, 2017, and others too, we were also pretty much right at neutral during the peak. So it could really go either way. And you would especially say that when I show you the CANCIPS forecasts, this definitely right here represents the uncertainty that we can have in an ENSO neutral. The CFS kind of taking a more cooler route, and I think the CFS might actually be leaning a little bit warmer with their ENSO forecast. I got to check how the actual anomalies look out here in the Pacific, even though the graph here generally indicates dead neutral. But the CANCIPS, I know for sure, is definitely on the colder side. And as a result, you could see much more of an active look in the Atlantic, especially here through the Caribbean. I would definitely look at this map. And if I were to make an inference from this map about whether or not the hurricane season would be active, you would definitely say that this map is indicative of an active hurricane season. And if you take a look at all the forecasts that we've got for this season, it pretty much represents exactly what the situation is between looking at these two maps. Some, indicating, maybe we might have an average season, maybe slightly above average too. We could actually get pretty active compared to normal, and that's pretty much a summary of all the forecasts we've had so far. Especially, I remember quite a bit of interest when CSU came out in early April. They were the first forecasts to be released this year. They came out and said out of the gate a pretty active hurricane season with 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 majors. And then we had TSR come out after that with an average season. University of Arizona then came out after that saying an average hurricane season. And I find this to be a little bit interesting because I've also seen quite a bit of people mention recently that University of Arizona has actually been surprisingly spot on over the last several years with their hurricane forecasts. So they show potentially near average hurricane season. Maybe they might be right, and we might not have as active as a hurricane season, especially compared to last year. So maybe we'll be on a little bit more of the more quieter side of ENSO neutral outcomes. We'll see. Some other forecasts too also show, maybe near to slightly above normal, and then occasionally we would have a forecast come out and then indicate pretty above normal, including the NOAA forecasts, in which they were surprisingly pretty confident on an active hurricane season. I think they had as high as a 60% chance of an above normal hurricane season. So I guess it's pretty safe to say that this year will be at least active at the level that it should be. So maybe an average season, which is 14 name storms, 7-3. Maybe we could get that. And given the fact that we don't have an El Nino and the Atlantic is warm, maybe we could get higher than that, and we could end up getting an above normal hurricane season. Wouldn't surprise me in the very least. But in terms of activity that we have right now, let's just really quickly go to the Atlantic. Nothing is expected, at least over the next several days. So at least we have that. We don't have any activity to be worried about just yet. Most of the activity to be concerned about right now is in the Eastern Pacific, and even that, most of it well, we shouldn't really see that much in terms of impacts with it. We have Alvin here, which is actually bringing some impacts to the Baja and northern Mexico right now, although none of it is significant, but it is a post-tropical system anyways. The latest sustained winds, 35 miles an hour, 1,006 millibars. And this is pretty much just going to move northward and completely die away, with the only sort of trace left of it is moisture that is going to be brought into northwestern Mexico and into the southwestern United States. So that's pretty much it for Alvin. Now we have to focus our attention to this area here in the Eastern Pacific. This is another area of interest that I think the NHC actually, maybe not yesterday, but the evening before, um, put this area up as maybe another area we might need to watch. And this one actually has now, yesterday was a low chance, today now is up to a moderate chance of development, 40% over the next week. So the Eastern Pacific is going to stay active. And I'll show you in a little bit. We might even have to start watching the Atlantic very soon, probably in the more distant future. But maybe it's time too that the Atlantic will start getting more active. I've actually been talking about that quite a bit over the last several days if you've been keeping up with my videos. But we'll see. We'll see if things start getting more active. But it looks like for sure the Eastern Pacific is not done. And here's a quick satellite image of the Eastern Pacific. You could see the remnants of Alvin. Some cloudiness over Baja and then northern Mexico. There's probably some rain showers occurring there today. Maybe some gusty winds, but again, nothing too significant. And then back over here towards the southwestern Pacific, you could see some more, showers and cloudiness. Nothing consolidating just yet, but we'll have to watch once again over Central America. This Central America area is really going to be where we're going to need to watch for things trying to consolidate. Because, again, as I mentioned, we're going to have an MJO coming through, and this will really help spark lower pressures and more cyclonic turning of the atmosphere over Central America, what we call the Central American Gyre. And we typically get this set up in the hurricane season, and that's what typically leads to these storms developing at least this early on in the season in the Eastern Pacific and sometimes the Atlantic. Not always does it happen, but sometimes it does. And models, I'll show you in a little bit, models do indicate that we might get something to occur. So let's look at the models right now. This is the 12Z GFS. Let's just roll it out into time here. You could see the kind of signature, the leftover signature of Alvin. At least that continues to move northward and then just completely disintegrates as it heads into Mexico. Once again, its traces will bring moisture to the southwestern United States. So if you are in the southwestern United States, such as southwestern California or Arizona, and you want some rain, you're going to have it in the next coming days. That's kind of the good thing about these tropical systems as they turn northward into Mexico, is that they could bring some moisture and rain into the southwestern United States. But beyond that, nothing much else. And then as we take it out into time here, we're now starting to get into late next week, over 5 days, and then into the 5 to 7 day time frame. You could see in the 850 millibar vorticity, something else trying to get going, some bundling of of energy in the atmosphere, and you can even see there's a closed low level pressure there. So maybe that is a small tropical system that the GFS indicates might try to form, and then it kind of forms a little bit, and then it goes back into Central America, as once again it'll be embedded within the Central American gyre, which is pretty much just this mess of generally lower pressures and vorticity over Central America as a whole, and that's going to produce a lot of these kind of small low pressures that are disorganized, have a lot of energy with them, but we'll have to see, do any of these consolidate and potentially become full-on tropical systems. And you can see here as we get towards the 7-day time frame, something else tries to form. It's kind of like there's something here that tries to form, and then there's something else here that tries to get going. It gets pretty messy with these Central American gyres. Once again, it's like this pretty much this huge blob of just or this very broad area of just a bunch of vorticity and generally lower pressures over Central America. So they're really hard to forecast, especially with the model like the GFS. Man, are they horrible with forecasting these Central American gyres. You could especially see that with the forecast, especially if you go out to the 200-hour time frame. They show all sorts of things, especially in the Atlantic, and I'm pretty sure you know that if you've been paying attention to the models over the last several days. I'm not going to entertain it, but I'm pretty sure if you've been paying attention to the models, you know damn well what I'm talking about. But we'll see. We'll see if something does try to develop, although it looks like, at least if you are paying attention to the GFS, they're indicating more activity occurring in the Pacific. And then I'll show you really quickly here in the Atlantic over the next several days. Maybe something trying to get going in the Western Caribbean. The GFS is kind of the lone wolf right now. They're showing some sort of bundling of vorticity, and then this goes on to become a hurricane. If you were to, take the model run out further from here, this goes on to become a hurricane into Florida. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is early June, and as I mentioned before, we are typically favored in this region for activity to occur this time of the month, and in terms of actual conditions here, I've been mentioning over the last several days, I want to do that, conditions are going to become more favorable in the Atlantic. So we'll see. But hurricane season is pretty much here. This is the last day before hurricane season, which begins tomorrow. And since hurricane season begins tomorrow, I thought I'd end off by telling you, I've kind of hinted at it over the past week, but I typically do this every single year. But tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, join me live on YouTube to kick off day one of the 2025 hurricane season. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to talk about what to expect for this hurricane season in a little bit more detail, a little bit more than today. I'm also going to share my personal hurricane season forecast, including what I expect numbers wise and impacts, where I think places could be hit the hardest this hurricane season. I do that every single year. So if you want to stay tuned for that, make sure to tune in once again tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. I may or may not have some special guests. I still need to see. I might not. Might just be me tomorrow night doing the live stream. But there's still a chance that somebody else might join. If you want to find out, you'll have to subscribe and you'll have to tune in tomorrow night once again at 7 o'clock. But other than that, that is it for today's video. And here we go. Hurricane season 2025 begins tomorrow. And I've been doing it throughout the entire week. This week, we've been doing tropical weather outlooks every single day, especially because we had Alvin this past week in the Pacific. So kind of like a little bit of a dress rehearsal. But from here on out, starting tomorrow, it's going to be every single day. We're going to be doing videos on this channel pretty much till the hurricane season is over. So if you want to stay tuned for that, if you're interested in that kind of content and getting updates every single day, we're going to do it starting tomorrow. Besides obviously the live stream tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And if you want to stay tuned for all of this, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment on it, and also share it with family and friends and anybody else you might find is interested in this content, but especially subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you can get whenever I upload videos the moment I upload them and get notifications for the moment I go live, which we'll probably be doing a lot this hurricane season, I'm sure. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will see you again tomorrow for the start of the 2025 hurricane season.